Good afternoon and welcome to this month's show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will be discussing the latest issues regarding IT modernization in the federal government. With me on today's show are Gary Washington, Chief Information Officer, USDA, Max Everett, Chief Information Officer, Department of Energy, Beth Kaloran, Deputy Chief Information Officer, GSA, Rob Dwyer, Partner, Kpmg, Bill Lemons, Technical Architect, Fortinet Federal, and Ian Thompson, Vice President, Software AG Government Solutions. Well, I think we all learned, or have learned, and we're evolving here about, making sure as a CIO we deliver that promise to the citizen, to the farmer, to the energy sector, name your mission, if you will. And that's always a delicate balance about also making sure that these systems are secure, they're resilient, right? And I think we all realize that the promise on both of those is you have to modernize these environments. And when you modernize them, you get, sort of both these things come together. Well, we're lucky today, we're fortunate because we have 3 agencies that are right at the forefront of modernizing their environment. They happen to be recipients of the TMF funds. And they're also using the centers of excellence, and in some cases at GSA, they're not only modernizing, but they're also building a shared service. So we have sort of a double whammy there, and a lot of our partners that are helping enable and making those things happen. So Gary, let's start with you in regards to just give us some examples of progress. You were sort of first out of the gate there. You guys have gone big, so to speak. I know that you went through phase 1, you're into phase 2. Tell us what's happening over at USDA.
Well, Luke, as you know, we are using centers of excellence to modernize USDA, and we use the COE framework where we're modernizing in 5 different areas: infrastructure, data analytics, customer experience, contact centers, and customer experience. So over the year and a half so far, we've been fortunate enough to be able to close 23 out of the 39 data centers.
Wow.
That we committed to closing. We've also, what our secretary is really excited about is our data analytics program, where we provide administrative dashboards in all our administrative areas and set up an infrastructure to share data so that executives can make informed decisions and look from the same source of data. And this year we're embarking on going into the mission areas and looking at mission area data so that we can look at programs to make sure you see how they can become more efficient and make strategic decisions. We're also aggressively migrating applications to the cloud. We have plans to collapse our networks from 17 to 2. And we've taken some structural changes in terms of, as you know, we had 22 CIOs at USDA. Now we have 8 assistant CIOs, and there's 1 CIO at USDA, and we're working together with our budget area to make sure we streamline the IT the process for investment and how we manage our IT budget as well.
So really hitting it on all sides, and that consolidation of the CIOs. You're one of the few cabinet level agencies that have done that at this point. It seems like it's reasonably successful there, which is awesome. How about over at Energy, Max? How are we doing over there?
So we made a couple of different, strides in the last year. One of them was at the end of last year, we got our first workloads out of our data center and up to the cloud, which is not something we'd done before. We were making some use of software as a service and cloud email at the headquarters and some other pieces, but for all of our headquarters networks, this was actually the first time we had moved workloads that we had sitting on-prem, in federal data centers, and move them out to the cloud. So that was
business applications.
Business applications. Right. So that was really an enormous step for us, and it's started the momentum to move further into that. Again, the goal this year is to move into velocity migration, to really start, and we've done a lot of the work of prioritizing, understanding what are the most important ones, what are the ones that we can most quickly move up to the cloud and get the immediate bang for the buck, the immediate delivery back to our customers. So that's been a huge element. We've also built, we built something out last year that was actually cloud native. So again, instead of going for, rip and replace, but actually building something that was designed and made for the cloud, those were stretches for us. That's not something at the headquarters level that we'd ever done before. And we got help, frankly, even from our national labs. Some of them have actually been very aggressive going to the cloud. And so we've actually gotten feedback and assistance even from their experience and their lessons learned to help us in that process. So that's probably one of our biggest changes. We also went through these sort of digital transformation work streams. We did about 7 of them last year, and we got, again, all the leads were not from my office. So they were from program offices, from labs and other places. And the goal was looking at many of the things you would think, around mobility, around collaboration, around all those pieces. And the goal was just to identify, again, in the distributed environment we have at the Department of Energy, what were some steps we could take forward. And so most of those have now actually rolled into projects that are in various phases. One of them is moving to leveraging the broader backbone that we already use for our science mission there at the department. We've got some still looking at mobility. We've got some that are looking at how do we take the next steps in collaboration in a federated department that's got 17 national labs, an enormous number of field offices spread across 27 states that all have very unique missions. How do they all work together?
And still yet you're doing this cross-pollination of the skill sets to drive the agenda forward. That's awesome. Rob, how about at Kpmg? I know you guys are right in the middle of a lot of these activities and are seeing a lot of stuff. And sort of give us a state of the state from where you guys sit.
Right. So oftentimes, many of our clients tend to be on the business and the mission side. So kind of business processes that are heavily reliant, as most businesses are these days, on
those
some
data
form
heroes that Gary talks about, right?
Yeah. Technology enablement. So we usually start at the business process first. And I mean, if you think about it, there's lots of old systems in government, but right, if you've got a 40-year-old system, you probably have 50-year-old processes. So the way we look at it is, don't just modernize the systems, because oftentimes processes were developed because of system limitations and things like that. So, and there's just a lot of inherent sort of out-of-the-box benefits you're going to get from new technology. So what we look at is say, what can you get just free because of the benefits of new technology, but also what would you do differently? Because oftentimes if you just take a system and say, we're going to re-platform it or move it to the cloud, you're still not going to get a lot of the native benefits of a cloud-based system. So oftentimes, and it's more difficult too. So if you have a really complex system and a mainframe or something like that, that's really difficult. So what we do is we plan it out and say, how would you modernize and change your business systems and business processes and modularize that? And so you might have sort of one big mainframe system that'll end up as 10 or 12 modules in a future state.
Right, sort of broken down into, all the way down into microservices, et cetera, and really take advantage of this new technology. That's fantastic. Beth, how about at GSA? There's a lot of activity going over there. You guys are cross-servicing. You're building organically some of your own environments. You're delivering COEs. Give us a state of the state at GSA these days.
Yeah, so it's actually an exciting place to be. We really take it seriously that we want to lead government on how technology can be advantageous to the business, and make sure that we are being as effective and efficient as possible, and try to run GSA as close to a business as possible. That's being done on a couple of different fronts, as you said. We're very happy that we've been able to launch things such as login.gov and cloud.gov that other federal agencies are being able to use to be able to modernize their capabilities. And then internally, we're actually very happy that, for example, just like Gary said, we have no data centers. We've closed all 120 of our data centers, and which resulted in about a $26 million savings that we have at this point. We have really accelerated and looked at what we could do for cloud internally, and moved many, not only of our business systems, but mission systems to the cloud already. And we're now looking at that next level of cloud adoption. We also have actually rationalized all of our help desks so that we actually consolidated our help desk capabilities and then modernized those as well. And we're now looking at the next step of how we really take that next leap into the user experience, making it similar to what you would do at home. How are you using kind of little vignettes to learn? How do you make sure that you're having the right kinds of mechanisms that you would want to interface with? So we want to make sure that we're looking at this from all parameters. How are we accelerating our cloud adoption? How do we make sure that we aren't investing in infrastructure if we don't need to? How are we improving that customer experience? And how are we making sure that we're looking at the rationalization of our applications and really investing in not the technology of yesterday, but the technology of tomorrow. And that is really where we're starting our artificial intelligence. We have a number of pilots that are happening in that arena. And we're actually also looking at NASA and others that have kind of done this journey as well, and doing lessons learned between the two of us so that we can accelerate into that arena, because we know we're going to need them for buildings, we're going to need them for cars, and we're going to need them for our technology.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. It's a lot of muscle movements going on at the same time there, and it's, you know, two things. You're adopting new technologies and sort of modernizing in a modern way, but you're also acquiring in a modern way, in a different kind of way, you know, buying it as a service versus Lego blocking that thing together, et cetera. Ian, how about over at Software AG? You know, you guys are right in the middle of a lot of this technology there that is enabling a lot of these capabilities to happen. What are you seeing out there?
Well, I think it's an exciting time. I think there's a lot of progress being made across all of government, and we're seeing government agencies, you know, modernize in a more modern way. I think is the thing that's exciting for us. And part of that is leveraging commercial best practices, and I think Beth was talking quite a bit about that and some of the activity at GSA. And really GSA has been helpful in encouraging agencies through initiatives like TBM, or Technology Business Management, to really apply analysis to IT assets and investments through the lens of business capability. And that's really what we're at the forefront of. And I think what we've seen is a number of agencies take a good steps of establishing sort of their as-is architecture and technology, and we're helping drive the cost and the time out of modeling to be state for IT architecture. So helping prioritize cloud migration efforts, really understanding from a business perspective what should be the best programs to modernize. And so we're basically enabling data-driven decisions for our CIOs, CFOs, chief enterprise architects, because there's a finite set of funding in many instances for these agencies. And so taking the risk out of which programs they choose to modernize, that's an area that we're really helping our government customers with.
It's perfect timing for TBM to come along, right? And it's a big equation about making a decision based on real cost versus what it's going to cost in this environment, what it's going to cost in that environment, and basing it on, the level of risk, right? Is this a high value asset, et cetera? So important to be able to do that and deal with facts, right? So it's very good timing for that to be introduced into the federal ecosystem. I think it's fantastic to see that being incorporated. Bill, how about down at Fortinet? How are you guys doing in regards to sort of what you're seeing out there enabling this community on this journey?
Well, this is a challenge that our organization sees across the globe. This pivot to cloud resources, trying to provide a higher level of efficiency as well as capability as this modernization effort moves forward. So we approach it from a couple of different fronts. One of those is this continual evolution of our technology in support of securing the various capabilities and in support of the missions that the agencies that we deal with bring to bear. And also that pivot to the cloud. That's an incredibly important part. As was discussed earlier, the concept is not just taking the workloads as they exist today and putting them on cloud-based resources. It's also re-architecting them from the ground up. You talked about microsegmentation and some of the potential security challenges that go around that particular concept. So we're pivoting a bit from still having some concentration on our hardware-based systems, but also delivering cloud virtual offerings that can take that same set of capabilities and bring them at different scales and positions within the architecture as it continues to grow and change.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome to see this mastery of sort of, start with a lift and shift, and then we're into refactoring, which we're taking advantage of some of the organic services that are available, then to a full organic build into these native cloud environments to take advantage of those native microservices that are available in the cloud, et cetera. Well, let's move on to, I always like to cite a specific program. I'm going to ask Max, you to start here. Just give us one example of a program that you guys are doubling down on that's really making a difference in energy and sort of maybe across the energy sector there.
Well, sure, a great example for us. So I mentioned we built out something called Big Data Platform, and it's a cybersecurity focused platform. It's open source, actually came out of defense.
Wow.
A number of folks over there are using it. It's essentially a cloud native platform for hosting our cybersecurity information. And we did it for many reasons, frankly, but it was a real stretch for us. We had not, at the headquarters level, we had never built anything to go straight out into the cloud, but that's what we did. And so it's already having impact for us to start, as we're now being able to start migrating a lot of the cybersecurity data that we have up there to start doing analytics. It's going to give us the ability to build new analytics, to use even some of the capabilities our labs have on machine learning, and as we move into AI, to bring those analytics. And so we can bring that capability to that data in the cloud. And again, if you think about the distributed environment we have, the idea that we would just stick all that data on-prem somewhere, we simply wouldn't be able to keep up. We already weren't. And so that was really a very fundamental change for us. And it's a tool we're actually going to be leveraging not only for protecting the department and our security and our data, but it's one we're already looking to leverage to do some of the work that we do with the sector as well.
Right. I mean, as soon as you bring that into that type of environment, not only can you store it all, but now you have the ability to compute all that massive data, which is just fantastic. Ian, how about at Kpmg? Give us an example of sort of what you're seeing out there in regards to a specific program. That's,
well, I think, one example of a great program that we've supported over time, and actually is a recipient of the TMF funds, is FHA. So, there's some parts of FHA, they've been at this for almost 10 years now, sort of with the mortgage crisis and things like that, modernizing their systems and processes. But there are some parts of FHA that have completely modernized their entire system and process portfolio. So I think they've still got a ways to go, just because it's such a big problem. But I would say there's some areas within FHA under their mortgage risk and fraud initiatives that have really made a lot of progress.
Fantastic. Beth, how about at GSA? Give us a specific example of a program that...
Yes, I'll give you an example of one that we did and one we're getting ready to do. So for us, while the technology is really what we want to achieve, it's the methodology by which we get there. So one of the things that we've really been adopting is a true DevSecOps, taking kind of Agile to that next level, and making sure that we have the security built in from the get-go and having those integrated teams that can move through that process more quickly. And we actually use that through a number of our projects, but one of them recently that was significant was our HR modernization. So we actually implemented a new HR system called HR Links that does our time and attendance and our position descriptions and our the workflows that we need to do around that. And we were actually able to do that very quickly with little risk to the agency. We're actually taking that same methodology as we look at our TMF funding that we have for our application rationalization and database modernization that we're getting ready to undertake. And we have 3 pilots that'll happen this year, and we'll use that same DevSecOps methodology to make sure that we are taking little pieces at a time and being able to move those through to success and learn from them before we go to the next job.
Fantastic. GSA is on the move. Well, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. With me on today's show are Gary Washington, USDA, Max Everett, Department of Energy, Bill Kaloran with GSA, Rob Dower with Kpmg, Bill Lemons with Fortinet, and Ian Thompson with Software AG. We were talking about specific programs. Bill, let me throw it down to you over there at Fortinet and give us an example of a specific program that you guys have seen implement, been a part of implementing that you'd like to highlight.
We've been working with our partners to deliver managed services for the various agency organizations. As the security service continues to move through this modernization effort, we've been providing and exposing some additional capabilities from a programmatic perspective, so that they can leverage that for an integrated and automated approach to various activities associated with their agency missions.
And I imagine that's got a significant impact across those agencies in respect to just that type of technology being inserted into that environment.
Yeah, it's trying to make sure that we can bridge that gap between hardware-based platforms within their traditional infrastructures as that migrates out to the cloud, and provide a pervasive and common interface so that framework can extend across those boundaries.
Sure. Gary, how about over at USDA? Can you give us a specific program that you guys have implemented or in the process of implementing that you know is going to make a big difference or has made a big difference?
Well, I mean, our leadership wants USDA to be the most well-managed, effective agency in the federal government. So to do that, we've created a customer experience program. There's an Office of Customer Experience, but within the COEs, we have a customer experience COE. And so what we've been really focusing on is bringing business value through IT to our farmers, ranchers, foresters, and scientists in USDA. So through activities such as farmers.gov, implementing the WHIP program, this year we will be able to have farmers view their loans online, pay their loans online, those kinds of things, making the experience that they have with USDA better than one that they have at home, and basically do everything, eliminate the manual processes and make it a pleasurable experience, to interact with us. It's not just for our employees, but our stakeholders and our customers as well. And that is intertwined with our contact center activities, and we're implementing this voice of the customer solution that allow customers to provide feedback to our leadership in terms of suggestions, how they feel, things that are going on. And what we envision is, through these processes, we're going to introduce artificial intelligence, robotic process automation to enhance that experience as well.
And when you say customers, that's both external customers, obviously the farmers, et cetera.
Yes.
The folks that are using those goods and services. And I would imagine internal as well. I mean, how many USDA employees are there?
We have approximately 100,000 USDA employees internally.
Wow. So, I would imagine that's a big voice of the customer as well, right?
Absolutely. We have offices in every county in the United States, and we have an international presence as well.
Right, you guys have like a foreign service officer corps.
Foreign agricultural service.
Right, that a lot of people don't realize that, which is a big footprint out there across the globe, right?
Yes.
At this point. And it sounds like some of those modernizing techniques are very similar to what happened at FHA, right? It sounds like a very similar type of situation there.
I think it is. I mean, some of the systems that FHA have, support major parts of the U.S. economy with the mortgage loans and things like that. And so there are people in mortgage banks every day, thousands of people logging into these systems that are supporting first-time and minority homeowners. So it's, it directly connects to a really major part of American society.
Yeah, I mean, right smack in the middle of, the American dream, if you will, right? Ian, how about at Software AG? Give us an example of a program there that you're kind of seeing, that's really making a difference as far as modernizing the community.
Sure. I think we have a few great examples, but it really starts with our customers recognizing that IT modernization is not an end state. There's no end game to it. And the example that I'd like to share is, we had a customer that initially was approaching IT modernization from a cost showback perspective. They wanted the business to understand what IT investments were supporting their business from a cost perspective, and that was the baseline that they wanted to put in place. And so they did some things, some of the blocking and tackling, normalizing the data, making it easier to gather current information from their stakeholders, and then putting this data in a dynamic repository. And the success story really wasn't that. It was a new CIO came into the organization and wanted to look at, instead of a cost showback type of model, he wanted to assess IT assets through the lens of customer experience. So how are my constituents traversing the IT landscape? And so what can we do to better deliver value from an IT perspective in support of the mission? And thankfully, the customer had the foresight to lay down this baseline, and instead of having to spend 6 months going back to gather more information before they could answer the new CIO's question, they were able to pivot, use the data that they had, and basically create dashboards to show IT assets through the lens of the business. And that was a big success for the customer. And I think the customer views it as they're going to be able to dramatically improve their IT modernization efforts now, because they are going to be so much more agile and be able to pivot to whatever might emerge in the future for their business.
Capability is really powerful. You can have those meaningful conversations with your business customers about how much it actually costs, why it costs that. It's benchmarked against a community to show comparisons, and you can make good choices. And I think that's really important. We're gonna pivot over into lessons learned, right? As we plow forward, and you guys are many of you at the forefront here. You're blazing a trail. You're discovering. You're learning. You're adjusting. And I always like to use this moment to communicate lessons learned for the community, so that we don't have to sort of rediscover that, right? Beth, let's start with you over at GSA. Give us some lessons learned as you guys have sort of been on this journey, right? You've readjusted, you've accelerated, et cetera. What are some lessons learned that the community ought to be thinking about as they move on this journey as well?
So I think for us, one of the big lessons learned we have is that technology isn't usually the challenge. It's the change management aspect, right? And so being able to communicate with a variety of stakeholders, especially the business, demonstrate the value to them upfront, continue to communicate with them, having those agile teams, making sure that they are prepared for that change, having a very clear roadmap of where you are now and where you're trying to get to, and have them understand what their role in that roadmap is and what they're going to get out of that investment really helps. Because the change management aspect for us it was one of the best lessons learned of how to make sure that we have that understanding and a robust mechanism to have continual and very collaborative communication with the 360 of stakeholders, which means customers both internally and externally, because as GSA is a shared service provider, we need to make sure that we understand what the federal government wants. That would also be stakeholders such as, making sure that we really understand and are in alignment with the President's management agenda and showing how we're making that demonstrated progress in some of those key areas that we want to accomplish. Making sure that we understand, what the folks in legislative and oversight organizations will be looking at, so that we make sure that we're building those types of things in and don't have pitfalls and having to pivot later in the process. So for us, I think one of the best lessons learned is to really understand, the totality of the environment by which you're going to make this technological change, your 360 of customers, how to communicate, and making sure you have that roadmap that clearly shows everyone where you're going, and have that buy-in all the way through the process.
What you're going to deliver, and in some cases what you're not going to deliver, right? So there's a common understanding about that. Bill, how about at Fortinet? Some lessons learned of what you're seeing out there that people ought to be avoiding.
Yeah, so I think Beth brings up some good points with regards to taking technology and not just introducing it for technology's sake, but ensuring that there is a great deal of a tie of that technology to the mission or the activities that you're trying to bring forward, and ensuring that you have solid processes around the incorporation of that technology, so that it can truly deliver both on the needs of the agency and organization, as well as provide an enhanced user experience as well. Well, we need to continually put a focus on the users, whether that's the constituents that the agency supports, or whether it's the people within the agency itself, making sure that whatever security processes we put in place are not a burden.
Right.
They need to be they need to be very flexible and intuitive, if you will, so that it encourages them to follow those policies as they move forward.
Absolutely. Stay focused on, are you delivering to that constituent, to that community? Max, how about at DOE? How about some lessons learned there?
I don't think they're rocket science. I would share three of them though. One of them, and knowing a little about GSA leadership and certainly over at USDA, leadership support is critical. So I think I would say at all our agencies, from the administrator and secretaries down, the leadership has been there, and without that,
it's been very impressive to see that. It doesn't go unnoticed.
And so I think that honestly, that's, and again, that's public, private sector, it doesn't matter. If that's not there, it's not going to happen. The second one, I think Ian kind of touched on before, which is the alignment, and everybody's talked about in a way, the alignment to the customer, and whether you're using TBM, whatever you're using to show value to the leadership of, this is why we're moving here, because we can show the alignment of value to the mission and the organization. I think that's really critical. And the third one I would say that I've seen at Energy is just move, just get something done. Inertia is obviously our enemy for a lot of us in federal government. I've had a lot of, listen, and again, cloud's an example, but, for us moving from a service provider to a service broker model, right, which is a mindset change for how we're doing IT services, moving to managed services, even going to shared services. Frankly, you have to look completely differently than just building a mission system. And I've had people flatly tell me in the department, well, the department's not ready to go to cloud. We're not ready to do service broker. And part of my answer, well, they're right. They're right. And I don't want to underestimate the workforce requirements, the governance requirements and things, say, to go to cloud. I don't want to underestimate those, but in my mind, I've told people, for me, it's like having kids. If you've had kids, you realize you are not ready to have kids. No one has ever been ready to have kids. And to be perfectly frank, moving to cloud, the same thing. If you're going to wait until you're ready, you're not going to do it.
Right.
And
at some point, you got to jump in the deep end and just start swimming.
And so, again, and it doesn't mean you just do a lift and shift just to do it, but what it does mean is you have to move, even if it's those little things, to start the momentum.
And I think it's great because there is a community out there, right, that's learning from each other and discovering and leveraging each other. I think that's fantastic. Ian, how about, you're sort of across that landscape, maybe a lesson learned on what you're seeing some agencies do that didn't work well, as they get on this journey, that others should think about, because it sounded good, it should have been right, but just doesn't work.
Yeah, I think the thing that maybe it just doesn't work is when you take a static approach. So again, there's an immediate opportunity to drive the cost out of gathering the data, to make the data more effective, and to basically reduce the time that it takes to get insight into your current state. And the mistake that I go, well, I don't know if it's a mistake, but the path that some agencies have been on is to do that on a one-off basis. So there's a data gathering effort, and then there's a report that gets created, and then almost as soon as that report is created, it's already out of date. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I really see as the opportunity to kind of drive cost and time and improve effectiveness out of developing a framework to make better decisions. And then the value is that it can have an immediate impact on cloud migration strategies, prioritizing investments, and being able to align IT with business strategies, even if those business strategies change, right? And so I think the danger is if you take an approach of doing that sort of every year, we're going to do this static data call. You don't put yourself in a position to be able to manage your IT investments and align to the business strategy. So
and sort of have that real-time data flow so that you're current. Gary, I'm sure you guys were out of the box kind of early. You made some big muscle movement activities. You're using the COEs, et cetera. As these other agencies kind of go on this journey, what are some lessons learned that you'd like to impart on them that they ought to think about and make sure they do more of this, less of that, whatever the case may be?
I don't think you can assume that everybody understands, and there's a lot of communication that goes into this at every level from the top down.
Right.
I think Max brought up a great point about the leadership. You have to take a lot of time to, prepare the leadership and have open, honest, transparent conversations about expectations and how you're going to do things. And this needs, I would tell agencies that this has to be a business-driven activity and conversation, because at the end of the day, they want to know what is the business value they're going to get out of these activities. And it cannot be a technology conversation. You can't lead with technology. And something that we're dealing with right now is you really need to think about preparing your workforce for this new environment. USDA is going to look a lot different than it looked before the COEs came. So we're thinking right now about, how do we, make that transition to, having people understand and be a part of the implementation of robotic process automation. What is their role in artificial intelligence? How do we introduce blockchain into USDA in some of our program areas, those kinds of things. And finally, I would say this whole experience has strengthened the relationship between the CIO, the CHICO, the CFO, the procurement executive, and the budget director, because we've all had to work together on this activity. So it's not just about IT. It's about the CXOs and the whole leadership team working together.
It's a real community effort, right? I mean, you can't, I used to say, look, I don't have the authority to hire a single person in my organization. I don't have the authority to buy anything. This is there's got to be goal congruence on the journey of enabling the mission, right? That's what we're doing here. We're not modernizing, we're enabling USDA.
But I would also say don't underestimate the culture in your agencies.
Sure.
Yeah, because that's a big part of this as well.
All right, well, we're going to take another short break, and we'll be right back. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. With me on today's show are Gary Washington, USDA, Max Everett, Department of Energy, Bill Kaloran, GSA, Rob Dwyer, Kpmg, Bill Lemons, Fortinet, and Eon Thompson with Software AG. We were just wrapping up our discussion around lessons learned, and let me throw it down to Kpmg. Rob, give us a lesson learned that you're seeing out there. Maybe a positive that's going on that people ought to know, or something they ought to avoid.
Sure. Well, one thing that we think is really important, and Beth mentioned it earlier, is, and it sounds really basic, but have a roadmap, right? So start with a plan that integrates the business capabilities that you're trying to deploy, the new technology that you're trying to roll out, phased with time, because often there are business capabilities and also technology deployments that are dependent on one another, and things take a long time. So if you have a roadmap, you can prioritize things. And also, we live in an uncertain world, right? Funding profiles change. Sometimes you get access to funding. Sometimes you lose funding. So if you have a plan, you can change it. And what we've seen is it's kind of like he who has the plan, or the person with the plan, wins, right? So if you're in the middle of the year, if you're at the end of the year and you get access to funding, it's not just give me some money and I'll figure out what to do with it. It's, hey, this is the next business capability we need to deploy. We're ready to go. And that tends to help a lot. And we've had clients, looking back on it years later, we're like, oh, wow, they actually executed their entire plan. Now, it changes, but no plan survives contact with the enemy.
Sure.
So, and then I would also say a stable target architecture, sometimes with changing administrations and things like that, it can confuse sort of a long-term business or technology modernization if the major sort of underpinnings change, right? Or what's the
have
target
some
platform
stability there on the both the architecture, have a plan, have a playbook. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to play pickup basketball.
And then what I would also say is, I mean, a lot of government systems are kind of the only system in existence, right?
Yep.
They're very unique. So I mean, we hear a lot about the value of COTS and things like that, which I think is important, but also. If you're going to use a COTS product and highly modify it and customize it, you're really stripping away a lot of the benefits.
Yep.
You're locking in a vendor, and you're going to have to pay those licensing costs. At that time, maybe just look into an open systems development.
Sure. Well, let's roll over into major challenges. Let's start with Gary. Give us sort of that top 1 or 2 challenges that you're, sort of looking to overcome as you move on this modernization journey.
Well, one of the major challenges that we have is modernization is great, and we're doing this at an aggressive pace, but we have to also think about how you retire all of the legacy systems, and which will help you show your return on investment once they're gone. As the panel knows, a lot of people have invested a lot of time and energy into developing these, and they're not going to give them up.
Right.
They're going to go kick it. There's a lot of passion around it.
Yeah.
So, how do you retire the legacy and not just add on additional cost? And another challenge for us is trying to condition our IT workforce to think about how do you deliver IT services and goods in a different way, rather than the way we're doing it now. We have these, some of these monolithic systems, delivering services from the cloud is a lot different than what we're doing now. So those are the 2 major challenges that we have to overcome, and we have to continue to show value. Right. Even after this is over with, and this is not going to stop when the COEs leave. We need to continue to build upon what we've developed and implement it.
Right, got to be respectful for the environment and be delicate about that, but move into this next journey. Max, how about over at DOE? Challenges
so
there.
Internally, Gary already hit one, which what I just call technical debt.
Sure.
Right, which and so if you're trying to buy a house, go move into a nicer house, it's hard to save up for that down payment when you're paying off a lot of loans and credit cards, and that's what technical debt really represents, is how we get out from under that. I think the second part of that really goes to the workforce skills and expectations. Again, as I talked about that idea of moving to a service broker model, moving to managed services. Most of us in government are not doing that. Even in private sector, people have a real challenge properly managing a managed services contract, right? Which means understanding your own requirements and deliverables, documenting them properly. That's a significant challenge. And I think just externally, certainly for all of us in federal government, I think we have not done a good job as a government of overall, when you look at life cycle planning, broad life cycle planning for our systems, I think there's got to be a lot of improvement from procurement and acquisition all the way over to the appropriations and budget process. Without that, it's virtually impossible for most of us to really do the kind of long-term life cycle planning that most of our colleagues in the private sector, not everybody in the private sector is perfect either, but they typically have a lot more, at least, ability to try and build those longer-term life cycle plans holistically for all their systems together, and we don't necessarily have that in government, and that's a thing that's got to get changed, and it's going to take a lot of different groups to do it.
Transitioning to smart buyers, not easy to do, is it, Beth? Give us one challenge, major challenge.
So I will say, in addition to the ones that we just heard, it's kind of twofold. So one is the fact that we are trying to do all of this new technology, and the security threats and things that are happening evolve every single day. And so that particular thread of security and what's going to happen and how those adversaries are going to come at us, we are always one step behind, and how do we try to pivot technology to at least keep pace with that, and as we're putting solutions in, making sure that they're agile enough to make those challenges and be able to pivot as we know the different things that are happening, because the challenge of today from a cyber perspective and how they're coming at us is not going to be the same one that happens a year from now.
Build that resiliency into those environments, so when it does come, you have some survivability. All right, we're going to wrap it up. We've got about 11 minutes and change, and we're going to talk about the vision and just sort of paint a picture of, what does the future look like when you sort of looking over the horizon. Bill, let's start with you down at Fortinet.
So Beth mentioned a good challenge, and that is the people. And how do you take that into consideration? The landscape is changing as far as the attack vectors that people are using. They're getting more sophisticated. The talent pool is very small. You need to be able to build an environment that can scale to the challenges that come, and do it with a relatively constrained workforce. So today the approach is more on the front of integration and automation to help on that front. But it's still looking at security as an overlay, a blanket or a fabric, if you will. I think it needs to move to the next level of creating this mindset of almost security as DNA. It needs to be inherent in the skill set that the people that you hire at every position, whether they're security analysts or whether they're performing your mission activities. It needs to be within their DNA to think about security. It needs to be in the systems that are built within the cloud or within a private data center. It needs to be within the hardware that makes up the infrastructure itself. It needs to be a coordinated effort moving forward so that we can scale and address those issues long term.
Security embedded, security as DNA. Ian, how about at Software AG? What does the future look like?
Well, I think we're on the path to the future, and Gary and Max both brought it up. But what I see through some of this IT modernization efforts and taking a more data-driven approach, you're going to see IT and the business users develop a much closer partnership, and IT is going to be perceived as adding real value to the business versus a necessary evil, and the way that's going to happen is, there's going to be better decision making around rationalizing applications, delivering value to the business, and I think what you're going to see is that IT is going to be more nimble in adjusting to IT, to business strategies. And one of the areas that I think about is, and again, it's not a final state, but one of the areas I think about is, especially in the case of energy, is, Internet of Things and 5G networks, particularly in the actual energy space. And so how does IT, I think what you'll see in the future is IT will partner with the business to deliver value and to deliver technology that supports their mission in a more nimble way. So
nimble, quick and easy, and very precise because of much more accurate data. Beth, how about at GSA? What is GSA going to look like in 3 years?
So I think for our organization, I think that you're going to see two things. One is the acceleration of those shared services, really trying to be that premier service provider for across the federal government, and how to make sure that we're building on the success of the Federal Acquisition Service and the Public Building Service to really show, things like we're doing with the COEs and 18F, of really how to take what we've learned from technology and get into those agencies and accelerate their adoption of new technology. I think that's one. I think the second one is that, as we start moving more into the artificial intelligence realm, we've already started, just in some pilots, a couple of our pilots have shown significant decrease in hours. One, almost 10,000 hours we think we're going to save in labor just to be able to run that one bot. Wow. And I think that as we move into those platforms, what we really will see is, so what we were talking about is being able to shift some of our folks and be able to reskill them and get them into this, out of the data administrative and being able to data keying things in and actually moving to high value work, be more strategic in what they're thinking and being add more business value versus data entry. And so I think that you're going to see a rapid acceleration of some of these artificial intelligence platforms so that we can make that shift and be able to be more responsive to the mission.
Yeah, and a lot of people, seem to be concerned about robotics, automation. And I said, yeah, it just takes the robot out of the individual and allows them, to move up the value chain, right? And I think that's really awesome. 10,000 hours, that's a big deal. Rob, how about over at Kpmg? What do you see as far as the future?
Well, I mean, I think what the federal CIOs who are leading these technology modernization initiatives, they're really enabling their customers to get new capabilities that really kind of resemble the best of commercial platform businesses. So I think the future is processes that are centered around the customer experience from end to end, and it doesn't have to be a citizen, right? It could be a business, it could be another government entity that's based in the cloud for scalability and broad access and interaction with other systems, and then can in real time or near real time use the digital exhaust and all the data that is produced as part of any process to make better decisions. I mean, as Ian was saying, a lot of times it's a data call, it's once a year, and that's just not sufficient anymore for decision making. So I think taking advantage of the data that is produced every day throughout these business processes and then using advanced data analytics, RPA, intelligent automation, things like that to make better decisions and support everybody's customers better.
Do it in a real-time, automated type fashion, right? And get down to these really fine-grained types of capabilities is going to be fantastic. I mean, I'm just amazed at what we're going to be able to do with AI, particularly with all the data we're collecting. Max, how about at DOE? Tell us what does the Department of Energy look like in 3 years? What does the sector look like in 3 years?
Well, I think a lot of it is what we've talked about, which is everybody's kind of already hit on, which is part of our goal is to have a broader integrated digital platform. Our labs and other folks create enormous amounts of data that we can make some pretty tremendous use of. And of course, again, many of our labs are doing some of the most cutting edge research on AI and moving those forward. So we're trying to take these large bodies of data we have, specific business problems, and then how can we apply AI quickly to those to start to answer those questions and draw value out of them. So we're really trying to build those platforms across a distributed department that let us do that. So I think that's what you're going to see a lot of the next couple of years at the Department of Energy, is really that focus on building out those platforms in a meaningful way, with some architecture around them, so that when you're moving the data across, back and forth, and just understanding where your data is, that becomes an easier job. And then we can more quickly apply the lab capabilities to all that data.
And we were talking a little bit about quantum computing, and I know the labs are already sort of, do you see that in 3 years really becoming sort of mainstream, or is that going to be still more of a lab specialized kind of?
That's probably a whole nother panel, but I would say, we got to be careful when we talk about
wet the whistle for the audience.
Yeah, when we talk about quantum, I think one of the things that I've had to go back and try and really learn some physics I've forgotten from 20 years ago, but quantum computing is a decent ways away. Now we are actively today, right now, and things that came out of our labs doing, for example, quantum key exchange, right? So we have an active quantum, we have a quantum network between two of our labs, Argonne and Fermi, today. So we're using quantum today, right now. But when we talk about quantum, there are a number of things you use, from key exchange, other things, all the way up to quantum computing. And quantum computing is very different, because you're going to need an entire new, essentially programming language and vernacular to make that use of it. So that's farther out, and so people have to be careful when they walk through those. But the great news is our labs are using quantum today, right now, and starting to find places to apply it to security and other missions right now.
You heard it right here, USA on the forefront of quantum computing, which I'm glad to hear that. Gary, what does USDA look like? What's the experience for that farmer, in 3 years, 5 years, right? Right now they're in their combines, they're doing a little bit of GPS, or, getting some level of intelligence there. Fast forward us into that next.
I think USDA will be delivering services to our customers in a more modern fashion. The farmer today goes to the service center office in the county, and there may be a lot of paper that they fill out and everything. They'll have opportunities to experience the digital experience that we're trying to implement for them, or have the option to use that digital experience on the farm or go into the service center. And this data-driven approach that we're using is forcing people to really think about the data that they have and cleaning that up and the decisions that are being made on that data. And the track that we're going down is forcing our the conversation with the IT professionals are going to be different. Because, you know, artificial intelligence, RPA, we're looking at blockchain in several areas. You know, the conversations are more business-driven conversations and not technical conversations. And our community has gotten a lot smarter or more informed about, you know, being able to use technologies. And the IT professional at some levels don't have to be involved as much because of the way technology has evolved. And I think for all of us, given where we're going, the role of the CIO is going to change if it hasn't already in terms of it's very important that we had a seat at the table and have business conversations about, you know, IT.
Sure. Well, that's a great place to wrap it up. And I want to thank all the guests for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us for this program. I really do appreciate that. I'd like to thank our sponsors for without we don't have a show. I'd like to thank the good people here at the Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on the Federal News Network.